So today what we're going to do is we're actually going to go and take a look at a push button pin, and then we're going to see if we can actually control the pin using our Arduino. Now, here's the thing. We need to be able to read information from a push button pin. The first thing that we need to do is we need to go and get a breadboard. Now that we've got our breadboard, what we need is a push button pin. Now, this push button pin's not in the right orientation. We need the pins turned slightly so that we have the pin bridging the gap between the top half and the bottom half of the breadboard. Now, in order to get power directly into this thing, we're going to use power directly from our 5-volt line in our Arduino. Now, by doing so, this provides power to this entire line because there's a metal piece. There's a metal that goes down here, and that's a conductor, and it travels, and the power comes directly from here. Now, in order to get power into this thing, into this button, we have to think of it this way. We got power that we're going to take power directly from the power line, and we're going to add it to line 26 there. Now, what happens is power jumps from here all the way to here, and then goes all the way up into terminal 1A. Now, when we press our button, what we want happening, what's supposed to be happening is the space between these two pins is bridged. So now power goes and flows directly from here, from pin 1A down to terminal 2. So now, once we've got power going into something, we always need to make sure that we have our pin have a resistor to it. Now, because we need to control the flow of electrons. Now, the fact is, I don't necessarily have to have my resistor here. I could have had it here. It doesn't matter where it goes in this circuit as long as the overall flow of electrons to this whole thing is controlled at some point. Now, when we are reading information from this pin, we're going to go and take it from, say, pin 5. I'm going to make pin 5 green, and I'm actually going to connect it right in between where we know power is flowing, between the part that sometimes gets power and doesn't get power. So remember, this part only gets power when we press this button. Now, I'm going to change this to a green wire. Now that I have that, now remember I told you that this whole thing needs to be grounded. This whole thing is supposedly grounded, but if you look at it, it's not actually grounded yet. So we have power going in and out and over and through, but at no point have we grounded it. Now, I'm actually going to take the opportunity to ground this entire board by connecting the ground to this spot, to this minus sign right here. So now this whole row acts like a ground, right? And this thing, and this green line is technically grounded by this black line, and then this whole circuit here is grounded by this side of our board. Now, for us, we have to take a little bit of time and kind of understand how our code is going to work. Now, I know some of you guys want to kind of understand how we control what's actually happening in here. Now, inside our Arduino code, you'll notice you'll have this block here. So sometimes it shows up as blocks. Sometimes it shows up as blocks and text, right? And I want you to understand what's going on in the basic text. So here's what we're going to do. You and I are literally going to kind of understand what's happening here. So first things first, let's go and use a thing called documentation. Documentation is this. You use the // This allows a programmer to state what's happening in code. Now that I've done that, right, that means that anytime I go and create a command, I can take the time to make sure I understand what's going on. So inside this section here, there are two different sections. We have a setup section and a looping section for our code. So the looping section is something that just keeps going and going and going and going on forever. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to take information and we're going to say, hey, remember how we have this button here? We're going to say pin 5 is literally going to take a look, take input directly from this button here. So anytime I press this button, if it's on, pin 5 will say, hey, tell me what's here. Now, in order to tell the Arduino what is actually happening with pin 5, we actually have to do this. Ready? Pin mode. So this is going to set up pin 5 as input. So pin 5 is this. Ready? Pin mode 5 input. Okay? So now you're telling Arduino right away that pin 5 is going to take input. It's either going to be high input or low input. It doesn't matter. Right? Now that we have our input, right? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to read our pin? It would be awesome to read our pin, right? Because if I click this, I want this pin to be changed. Now, let me just quickly show you something. So these other pins here, these tildes, could be analog pins, right? So what I tend to do is you can move it from D5 to D4 or D7 by actually, ready? Clicking on your line and then waiting till your button has highlighted at the end of your line and then move it. So I'm going to change it to pin 4. So in order for this code to work now, I got to go and use pin 4. So now that I've got pin 4 as my input, let's go back and make sure your comment states it, right? So now we've set up pin 4 as input. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to read that input somewhere? Now, think of our setup. We set up our code, right? And then what we got to do is we got to be able to read that information somewhere, right? Now, let us do that right now. So now, in order to read information, I'm going to make a variable. Now, a variable can be of type int in here, and that's what we're going to use. So anytime we're getting information from the board, it's either a 1 or a 0 or a number from 0 to 255 or some other number like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go int, and we're going to call this in value is equal to, and here's what we're going to do. Because this is a digital pin from our digital PWM here, right? From our digital, and because it's a digital, what we're going to do is we're literally just going in and we're going to say, okay, digital read, and we're going to go and read pin 4. So it doesn't really matter. What's actually happening here is the computer's literally going to sit there inside this loop, and it's always going to go, okay, check the initial value, and we're going to basically read that initial value from pin 4. So we're going to take the initial value and we're going to say, read my information from pin 4. And that is what digital read means, right? So this is literally read the digital inputs. Now, here is what we want to do. So right now, if we click that button, this thing is going to read it, and we have the value called int value here. Now, see this thing called serial monitor? Serial monitor allows us to debug and see if what we're doing is correct, right? Now, in order to make sure that we get what we want in the serial monitor, the serial monitor basically allows us to print stuff to a screen so we can see what's going on. The first thing you got to do is you got to go back up to this section where our setup is. We need to make space underneath the pin mode section, and we're going to comment inside here, set up the serial output. Now this essentially adds a screen for our Arduino so that we can see what the heck's going on inside of it, to see if we actually got what we needed done. So now let's do that. So in order to set up our serial output, we set serial, I think it's serial.begin. It's got to be serial begin is 9600. So the fastest speed that any serial port can output or input is 9600 bits a second. Now, basically that's just something that's a holdover from many years ago. So when you're setting up a serial port in Arduino, it's allowing us to output to this serial monitor. So in order to get our serial monitor to output our value, all we do is this. So what we're going to do is we're just going to output what's going on in the in value that we read from our pin. Now the pin is always going to react anytime I click on that button. So all we're going to do now is you're just going to go serial.println bracket button value. I think we'll try in value. This might work. If this works, basically what we've just done is we say, all right, we don't know what's actually happening here. So when you go and put in quotations button value plus in value, it should output something to the screen so we kind of know what's going on. So now if we run the simulation, oh, we have an error. Digital read. Digital read. Did I spell digital read wrong? Oh, I spelled digital read wrong. Oh my goodness. Digital. So when you write this stuff in code, you need to make sure that it's written properly. Digital read is lowercase digital, capital read. That's our command, and we're telling it to read from pin 4. So now if we run the simulation and we move the serial monitor up, right? Right now the button value is nothing, right? Right? Nothing, right? So I guess we're having a little bug here. Let's stop the simulation and let's remove this part here. And we'll run it one more time and we'll see what happens. Okay, so when we click this button, oh, perfect. It's zeros and ones. So when we don't press, we have a value of 0. But when we do press, we have our high value of 1. And that's it. We're good to go.